Good morning, it's 8:34. I'll call the meeting to order. Meeting of the Carver Select Board from Monday, July 12th. This meeting is being cablecast by Area 58 Community Access Media, Channel 15, and will be posted by Area 58 on YouTube as soon as possible. If we could all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our community prayer. Almighty God, humbly we pray your blessing as we concern our life with the opportunity to serve our community. Enhance us with your spirit of dignity and selflessness. May we become instruments of support and understanding as we seek to bring an environment of trust and purpose among all who provide the many services that make us all that we can become. Help us achieve the goals of our commitment in this office that is now our responsibility. And especially, we lift our prayers for all the citizens of our community that we have been allowed to serve, that they may discover the fullness and joy of life that we all seek, and keep those serving in our armed forces and our first responders in our hearts and thoughts. Amen.
Amen.
All right, our first item on our agenda this morning is the discussion and possible vote to amend the charge given to the Town Administrator Screening Committee regarding the use of a consultant and the number of finalists to be presented to the Select Board. It was brought to my attention by Mr. Walsh, the Chairman of the Screening Committee, that all the consultants that they've reached out to have declined to take part in the process for various reasons. So in order to not hold them up, I think we need to amend this charge to change some of the wording. Otherwise, they're in limbo, basically, until they can find a consultant. So he asked me to call this meeting, and I thought it was a good idea. So is there discussion among the board?
I'll hit it first. Yeah, I don't know why we didn't get any consultants biting. It was probably the fee. I think my own opinion is maybe they're looking at more than $20,000 for a fee or whatnot for this. But I've done some little bit of research myself that it seems like a lot of towns they use the Mass Municipal Association there, but they also use Indeed, posted out there, and other online searches too. So I have no problem letting the committee do whatever they need to do to get this going. And if it takes, I mean, we do have our assistant town administrator, human resources, I mean, we have that available to us already. That's a resource, and we should utilize that. So I'll let other people discuss it now.
Ms. Jones.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we change the word "must" in the charge of the committee in bullet point number 2, that TASC must use a recruit consultant, and instead insert the word "may." I think that gives them the opportunity to have some discretion, possibly use some of the sources Bob was talking about, but also this way they don't necessarily have to use a company. They could also use someone like, and his name keeps popping up, I don't mean to dwell on him, but our former interim town administrator, who was Jim Purcell, someone who's already retired, can't be a permanent TA, but might know something about the field that's out there. So that's my motion. Change the word from "must" to "may."
We have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Ms. Hewens, one thing that was brought to my attention as well, and that the Town Administrative Screening Committee must use a recruit consultant. I think there was some concern there that the word recruit sort of bound them as to the type of, so I wondered if you might consider amending your motion to eliminate the word recruit.
Yes, I will amend my motion to eliminate not only the word "must" and insert in its place "may," but to eliminate the word "recruit" before the word "consultant."
Was there a second?
Oh, I'll second that.
Okay. Mr. Hoffman.
Also on, 1, 2, 3, the, sorry, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's the sixth line down, the recruit consultant to do reference and background checks. Should we include that in this?
I thought what we might do is take these as individual line items. I think it might be easier than one whole basket is to take a motion and a vote on each individual
Okay.
line item, because there's a number of them on here that refer to the consultant.
Okay.
So if we change one, I think we need to change multiple. But we have a motion and a second on the line 2 in the charge. Is any further discussion? Ms. Bogart.
When I got the agenda, I did not know what this was about at all, so I went back and I actually watched the 2 meetings the committee has had, and it was very clear from, I mean, you guys may have watched them too, that at the first meeting, the committee thought that they needed or should use a consultant. You know, they went around the room and, you know, Chief Weston said it, Chief Walsh, Pat Mahar, Jen Pratt, everyone who was speaking was saying, yes, we should do this. And the reasons given were expertise, time, and optics. So I think it's unfortunate and troublesome, like you said, that none of the companies wanted to work with the town, which is another question, because they were discussing 4 companies at the first meeting, but then they decided to reach out to 3, and at the second meeting, Ms. Ross asked why didn't we reach out to the 4th one, or what about the 4th one? And I guess they said that there were bad vibes, but I hate to give up on the use of a consultant
Would not.
just because the first 3 didn't work out, because there are more out there. In the Mass Municipal Association Beacon, there's at least 3 companies in there. And at the second meeting, Mr. Mahar had suggested, similar to what Sarah said, using an independent consultant. So, no, they definitely need the flexibility to move forward. So much of the discussion was around, if we advertise on the 16th, we can't receive applications on the 17th per the charge. So the charge, I agree, definitely needs to change to allow for that to happen. But I don't think the idea of using a consultant should just be abandoned because the first 3 didn't work out. Because I know in my life, that's just not how I approach things. I try, didn't work out, all right, move on. So if the wording does change to May, because in that second meeting too, even when they had the discussion of, no one wrote back, you still had the members saying, well, I think it's important to do. You know, at some point, let's bring someone on. So I still think it's important that a consultant be used at some point for those reasons, for the expertise, which, the committee admitted. And I would feel the same way for us, too. This is not anything to do with those individuals or the fact that it's on that committee. If this was all on us and we were in charge of it all, I would put out there that I think we should use it too for those same reasons, the expertise, the time, and the optics. So if the wording is going to change to May, personally, I would like to strongly suggest or, request that they continue to try to find a consultant to assist them along the process. And as for Bob, you saying maybe the fee was the issue, I believe one of the members of the committee said that the fee wasn't put out in their feelers to the companies when they sent the emails. You would know that the $16,000 wasn't mentioned. So I guess that $16,000 mark was not a reason that they would say no, because it wasn't in the first email, right?
Right.
And then if everybody's concerned about the fee, if the committee is taking on more responsibility, they talked so many times too about, well, there's line items, so we can come back to a consultant and say, well, we'll handle this, take this off, we'll do this. So even if they're not getting the consultant right away, so it'll cost less. But I really feel like they should continue to try to use one because it will be an asset in some regard. And they were not anti it even after they got 3 no's. So
Okay.
I would support the May, but really strongly encourage too. I want that as the backup. Mr. Mahar, I don't know how many times he sat on this side and said he wants feedback from the select board. So I think I got the impression that he wanted more than just a word change. Okay, we got a may, but why? What was their feedback? So to Mr. Mahar and the rest of the committee, my feedback is that I would love to see you guys continue to pursue using a consultant in some fashion.
Thank you. Any further discussion?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I agree with Jen. I think that we could vote on this, and then if, for example, you wanted to make a motion to add an additional strongly encouraging sentence, maybe that would make things more plain.
Mr. Hoffman?
I think, Jen, what they had said at the meeting as well, where they weren't giving up on it, but I think that must really hamstrung them a little bit. So I think having that option of what the, may, I think they'll still look at it because, again, they realize the optics, the professionalism, the time that I think they will use, continue to look. And like Sarah had said, maybe with Mr. Purcell or someone in a similar capacity. So I just don't like I don't want to, the whole thing was directing them. They have to do this. And again, we wouldn't want people telling us what we have to do. We give guidelines, and then hopefully they'll follow the guidelines, which they seem like they are. I just think we have to be very careful how we do that.
It was clear to me watching the meeting as well that I think the majority of that board wanted to use a consultant. They just haven't been able to find one. I think we need to give them flexibility to be able to keep moving the process forward, because they have a very tight timeline, and we really can't afford to hold them up. So, Mr. Belden.
Yeah, I too watched the videos of those two meetings, and the 16,000, I thought when I made that motion, it was 16,000. If they need more, they come to us. But it says on here, no more than 16,000 on this.
Well, I think the initial, and I don't have the minutes in front of me, but I think the initial was they could spend 16,000 without coming back to us.
Correct.
And then if they wanted more, they could come back to us and we could approve more. But I think there was a cap initially.
Okay.
I think that's what it was. But, and again, depending on what they need, they can always come back to us. But again, I just think we need to give them the flexibility to do their job on a timely basis. Otherwise, the whole timeline is going to be thrown off.
Right.
So,
I also, before Sarah made that comment, I wrote May too, same wording. But I'd like to actually get rid of the no more, and then can spend 16,000, if needed more, seek select board. To actually put that in writing, so they know that we do support them, and if they need more for it, then they can come back to us. So I'll ask that be a friendly addition to this motion.
Ms. Hewens, are you willing to change your motion?
Oh, yeah, sure,
Could
that's
you
fine.
Could you read back the amended motion?
Yes. The Town Administrator Screening Committee may use a consultant and may spend $16,000 for such purposes to return to the Select Board if more money is needed.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? It is unanimous. So then we have item 4 on the charge, which currently reads, review and receive resumes from the recruit consultant. Obviously, I think we need to change that since there may not be a recruit consultant. Is there a suggested motion there?
I'll make,
I make a motion that we cut the word recruit from line item 4.
Okay, so just review and receive resumes?
Correct.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second?
From the consultant.
I'll second. I'd like to make an addition that we, after received, we put all resumes from the consultant.
Well,
Just-
but the consultant is going. We're eliminating the word consultant.
No, we're eliminating
no,
the word
recruit.
recruit.
Well, but what if they don't end up hiring a consultant at all?
Add if applicable.
Yeah, I think
If
we...
used.
Yeah, or just leave it, review and receive resumes. Whatever the board feels, but if they don't have a consultant, then
Right.
the consultant can't receive the resumes.
So if we put if applicable,
Yeah,
at the end.
yeah.
So what is your wording, Bob,
So
just
it'd be-
so Shelby's clear?
Review and receive all resumes from the consultant
If consultant is used.
is
Right.
used or is applicable. I'm happy with either one. I put if used.
Well, I think if
Yeah.
used
Yours
is
is more
used, if consultant is used, because that means if it's not used, then it's the committee that will.
Yeah, I
review.
would say Mrs. Hewen's wording is a little more applicable there.
Okay. I'll second.
All right,
Or, actually, I can't second my own.
Well,
Okay, so you want me to reread the
yes,
motion?
yes, if you could.
Review and receive all resumes from the consultant if a consultant is used.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Discussion. Mr. Hoffman?
I have a question.
Yes.
So what if a consultant isn't used? Do we need another line item to say review? It might be just simpler to say review and receive all resumes received. If they come from the consultant, they do. If not, I feel as though we might need another line item to say review and receive all resumes received, period.
Yeah, I tend to think that's pretty clear.
Okay.
I'm just throwing out that.
So,
Ms. Hewens, are you willing to amend your motion?
sure.
We have an amended motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Ms.
Shelby, are you clear
Blair, are you?
Yes.
on the wording there? Okay, we went back. Okay, so then we have the fifth item down, which currently reads, conduct interviews of selected candidates using established questions from the recruit consultant. And again, we have that word, so we need to amend this wording. And I perhaps thought, go ahead, Mr.
I'll make a motion that we write, conduct interviews of candidates utilizing established questions from the consultant if used.
Well, or, again, we have that same issue we had with the last line. And I wondered if perhaps it should just read, conduct interviews of selected candidates, and that's all. I mean, obviously, they're going to have to interview the candidates.
Well,
If they don't have a consultant,
I think you should, first of all, change the word utilize to use. And second, I think you do need to have established questions. I don't think they can just be arbitrary questions, whether they're from a consultant or whether they're from the committee itself.
okay.
So how about conduct interviews of selected candidates using established questions? That way, somebody has to agree to what those questions are.
We have a motion. Is there a second for that? Well, I'll second it for discussion.
Okay?
So-
Mr. Belvin?
So if it says conduct interviews of selected candidates using
established questions.
established questions, well,
I guess,
they have to go through a selection process. I just trying to get my hands around
Yeah.
how they're going to do it. So
So-
they're going to get the applications that are all going to come in, all the resumes are going to come in. All right, they're going to filter through them and basically put interview, non-interview
Right.
piles, okay? And then they're only going to review these ones and interview how many of these are they going to pick to interview to bring forward to.
Well, that's up to
That's
them.
what I don't understand is
So-
that,
So the way I'm reading this, selected candidates is just like, as you said, say there are 10 applicants. These 5 don't even fit the picture because they don't have the years of experience, the education, whatever it is. These 5 do. And then they interview those 5. But my point is that they need to have some questions established at the get-go instead of everyone going home one night and thinking up something to spring on the, they all need to kind of agree what are the questions. And so from those 5 interviews, then they do the background checks, and then they come up with, 3 that they present to us, or something like that.
Okay, all right.
Any further, Mr. Hoffman?
I guess my question is, using established questions, what does that mean? Like, who establishes the questions?
They will.
It would be either the
screening
committee or the consultant if they have one. If they don't have a consultant, then the committee would agree on what those questions are.
Okay, so do we, and again, I don't want to get too nitpicky and tell these people exactly how to do their job, but wouldn't a screening committee know that they have to have questions? And if not, using established questions, I don't know, I'm just kind of getting confused. We're getting too,
Then we should just say questions established by either the screening committee or the consultant.
but I guess my question is, being on a screening committee, wouldn't they know they have to conduct interviews using established questions?
No.
No?
Yeah.
No,
And again, it's
if
my
someone
first time going through
resigns
this,
from
so-
the planning board,
So-
and so the planning board and the select board get together and we meet,
Right.
and everybody, and this is something that's actually bothered me for years, everyone pops their little question, instead of the board saying, okay, let's look at our questions, let's all agree, ask, you always ask your one, I ask my one, we have 5 questions, and they're all the same, we all agree on what, that's what I think of when it says established questions.
That was my feeling as
I-
well.
In other words, it's not just ad hoc, everyone's, dreaming up something on the
So
fly.
maybe more of, the committee should have established questions before the interview process.
Yeah.
Maybe something along
Yeah.
those lines. I just,
I think they will. They'll have to establish the questions before they have the interviews.
correct.
So do you want to add conduct interviews of selected candidates using established questions established prior to the interviews? Does that work better?
I don't know. I mean, again, I would assume, well, I know you never assume, but you would think that the screening committee would know that, I guess. But
Not necessarily.
Ms. Bogart?
So using questions established prior to the interviews?
Correct me if I'm wrong, because it may have been on my own research, but I believe when we were talking about establishing the committee and Elaine sent us out all the references from other towns of who's on the committee, I believe she used an example of questions that were used during interviews. So using something like that as a template to establish or to create their questions is valuable. Because what you want to ask a prospective town administrator might be different than what you would ask, any other position. And again, I'm not a professional. They were very, very open, with not that expertise. Again, why a consultant is great. But when you're hiring a certain position, there are definitely certain questions you want to ask. So if nothing else, in addition to bouncing ideas off each other and coming in with their own, I think they should use resources like the one that Elaine sent, or looking into if they can find other questions that were asked of town administrators. There's definitely some sort of kind of standard or usual questions that are asked. So it's not just, like when we were hiring the committee, you asked the same question, I believe, you guys all asked the same question. I asked mostly, but I didn't know what your question was going to be before. But doing, in my mind, established questions means they all agree upon the questions
Correct.
before the interviews.
That's why I suggested that it read, conduct interviews of selected candidates using questions established by the committee
Right.
or the consultant prior to the interview.
And it would be great for them to have resources like what
Oh,
Elaine
yeah.
sent us, examples from other committees. If there's not a consultant, independent or firm, getting to that point, there's got to be other resources
Right.
used.
And they can
Because-
use all those resources.
And they
Right.
can use any resources they want.
Right.
Including Elaine and,
But instead of just, okay, this, let's help them. I don't want to be overbearing, but I also want to help because I've said it before, this position is extremely important. So let's do it right, let's have them do it right, and let's have us do everything we can to help them do the best they can. So there's definitely resources out there, and if Elaine hasn't already sent them what she sent us, I think she should.
We can certainly, let Ms. Westa know that she could reach out. Yes, Mr.
Yeah.
Belvin?
You know what, the more I think about this is that I have the utmost faith in the committee to do the right thing and to know how to run it, and I want them to have as much resources as they can for it. I think just conduct interviews of selected candidates, period, because they're going to ask questions. It's a standard. They're going to do that anyways. Okay, why do we actually have to add this in to say, hey, this is what you have to do, how you have to do it? They're going to interview. How do you interview? You ask questions. All right, and like, I agree. We got that paperwork that said, these are questions, all right, and just the questions alone that we got, they were pretty detailed in the sense of saying, okay, and they can pick and choose what questions they want to ask. Let them have that ability to do that, so.
Well, I think this does, though. We're not telling them which questions.
Yeah, we're not,
No, I understand that, but I don't think we need to. I don't think we need to tell them you got to ask questions.
I guess to piggyback on that, do we have to tell them to conduct interviews?
Yeah.
well, it's part of the charge. That's their,
and I-
part of their job is to interview the candidates, I
And I
think.
guess,
We're
and I
not
guess
telling
my
them so
question I'll
much.
ask to anybody, and again, I'm new, so I'm going to admit ignorance on this, but as a charge, do we have to be that specific on each thing? I mean, the people that have been selected for that committee are all professionals. They all, I think, know what the job is. Do we have to be that technical, step by step by step? I just,
Well,
again, I don't know. I've never been involved in a charge before, so I'm not sure if we have.
Looking to me, Mr.
I would look to you,
Midpoint.
Mr.
As you can imagine, I've been trying to stay out of this to some extent, but I would agree with you, Jim. I think the people you've selected a really good committee made up of people like the chiefs, like Pat Mahar. They've hired people. They know how to hire people. They know that you use standard questions. You follow up with particular questions that are particular to someone's resume or something that they've said during that interview. But I think, in my opinion, I think you have a really good committee, and I think to the extent possible, I think you should let them do their job. They know what they're doing. But that's just, you asked, Mr. Hoffman, so I.
No, and I appreciate that, because, again, the charge, what I thought was making timelines. You need to do this by this date, this by this date, this by this date, and then give us the final candidates. I didn't think we had to get down to the nitty-gritty, but you have to, receive the resumes, you have to look at the resumes, you have to, sort the resumes. Now you have to ask questions, and again, maybe I'm wrong. I guess, how detailed do we have to get? Does a charge have to be? Would be my question.
As an example, though, we just hired a position, well, I hope to, and in advance of that, those involved, we did develop questions that we all agreed to in advance, because realistically, that's what you do. If you want to have it in the charge, that's fine, but I think that's, considering your committee has quite a few government officials already, who, again, went through hiring processes, either as candidates or as hiring authorities. I think that's a pretty well-established template. But like I said, I certainly want to stay out of it as much as possible, but there's some people there that know what they're doing.
Mr. Chair?
Ms. Bogart?
Yeah, clearly it's a common sense idea, they have to do interviews, but it's also standard with everything I looked at. It's part of screening committee's charges throughout the state. It's just part of it. And one reason given was if, for the public, they want, okay, we're getting a town administrator, who's doing what? Like, if, without this being on there, this makes it very clear that the screening committee is doing the initial interviews.
Right.
And then passing it to the select board. So yes, to us, it's common sense.
I
To
think
them, it's common sense.
I think that's an excellent point. A lot of it is appearance to the public. I think and it sort of defines who's doing what. I
And
think.
transparency and just, hey, what is this process? Like, we know what we expect, or for the most part, and them too, but to someone who's coming in new to this, hey, okay, so this is their role and this is their role. So I think it's important, and it's not uncommon. It's not like we're being like crazy nitpicky here in town.
So are you suggesting it should be conduct interviews of selected candidates, period?
I have seen with the established questions throughout the state. So
Okay.
I would keep established questions. Again, not holding them to the fire,
Right.
for that term, but letting people who are not involved in the process know this is what's happening.
That's right. And again, we're not telling them what questions to ask.
Correct.
We're just telling them they have to establish the questions
Yeah.
prior to the interviews, that's all.
So I think my motion stands then. Conduct interviews of selected candidates using questions established by the committee or the consultant prior to the interviews.
So we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? It is unanimous.
Do you mind just repeating that one more time?
Sarah, could you read back the motion one more time, please?
Sure. Conduct interviews of selected candidates using questions established by the TASC or the consultant prior to the interviews.
All set, Shelby?
Yes.
All right, so the next item is the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
Sixth.
the sixth item down. Currently reads the recruit consultant to do reference and background checks. Obviously, if there's no recruit consultant, they're not there to do the reference and background checks. So, Mr. Belvin.
How about a consultant or town resources can do reference and background checks?
Is that a
Yeah,
motion? Is there
I'll
a
second that. Mhm.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Can you repeat that again?
A consultant or town resources, I'll set may, do reference and background checks. How about
How
that?
about town human resources?
The-
That's
Yeah, part of
more
human
specific
resources.
to, yeah.
And might I suggest, Bob, that we change the word may to do? Because I think we have to do reference and
Okay.
background,
Yeah.
not may do them. So,
That's fine.
so could you read the motion back one more time? So,
A consultant
Or town.
or the town human resources to do reference and background checks.
we have a motion.
Can I just offer rewording? I'm just trying, reference and background checks to be done by recruit consultant or town human resources, however we want to refer to.
That's way better.
All right, so we have an amended motion and a second.
To that.
Any further discussion? Hearing none.
Do you mind just repeating that one more time?
Reference and background checks to be done by consultant or, was it town human resources?
Human resources.
The town, yeah. Human resources of the town would.
All right.
Okay.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? It is unanimous. And let's see, the very last item on the screening committee,
Actually, Mr. Chair?
yes.
It occurs to me that we really should have in here that the TASC must comply with the Town Administrator Bylaw, Chapter 3, and with the legislation,
Okay,
and with, what is that called, Rick?
with the,
State legislation?
Special act?
And with the special act,
I think that probably makes sense.
because, it was a special act, so.
Yes, it was. Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion? Hearing none?
What-
Oh, sorry, Mr. Hoffman.
What is the special act?
That was the act that established the town administrator position.
Through the legislature.
Okay, just asking in for the people out in
Yeah.
Well,
Carver land that might have that question.
Mr. Belvin.
so the process, if I remember correctly, was that the town selectmen went before town meeting to go ahead and ask that the town have a town administrator position.
Right.
All right? And in order to do that, you're basically changing your government.
Yep.
Of how your government's being run. And thus, that went through, has to get approved through the state legislature, similar to if we want to change anything within our town government. It's like changing your bylaws of your corporation. And you have to get approval. So that's what happened, and that's where we're at. So that special legislation is how we made our bylaw.
Well, our bylaws don't have to go through the legislature. They go through the.
Well, it changed our government.
AG.
so-
It depends.
Yeah.
It depends. I think in Bob's case, there are towns that just establish a town administrator position, but he or she is an agent for the board. They don't have authority under the bylaws.
Right.
So to Bob's point, when you actually are vesting authority in an individual, now you have a situation where you're changing your government structure. And municipalities in this state are subdivisions, political subdivisions of the Commonwealth. So it's frustrating for us, it's frustrating for the public many times because local government doesn't always have the authority to do things. We don't get to just throw up stop signs and lights.
If I could just interject here, reading the agenda item that we have posted, I don't believe there's anything on the agenda that would allow us to change this. The only items on the agenda are the changing the charge given to the town administrator screening committee regarding the use of a consultant and the number of finalists to be presented to the select board. So I think while this is a good idea, it might be best left to our next meeting. We'll make that an agenda item.
All
on our
right.
next meeting.
Yeah, as long as this town administrator screening committee understands that it's not just, they don't have to just comply with our bylaws.
Right.
There is a special
I
act.
think it's an excellent idea, I just don't think we can
You're right.
discuss it at this
You're right.
meeting.
Can I have a question? In general, is it something as simple as just adding that wording to the bullet point, Sarah? Because I remember when Mr. Corbo came in and gave us that lecture on open meeting law, and someone asked, how strict do you need to stay to the agenda? He did acknowledge that conversation may stray a little bit, but if it's related to a topic there and you can settle it, quickly, then you can deal with it at that meeting. But if it's going to take a huge conversation, carry it over to the next time. So if it's something as simple as adding wording for something that's a straightforward legislative.
Mr. Belvin.
Yeah, and just to go along with what you are, is the open meeting law, it doesn't say that you can't do things that aren't on your agenda. If the chair reasonably anticipates that you're going to discuss it, all right, then you can't discuss it. But if you didn't know that she was going to make that change, did you reasonably expect that she would be making that change?
So I just think in the interest of clarity and openness, we should leave this to the next meeting. I'm not against it, but I think we should leave it, the discussion, to the next meeting.
I don't have a problem with that, but, excuse me, but I think that we are able to make that type of a change. And the big thing that the open meeting law says is, did the chair reasonably anticipate the discussion to go this way? And that kind of goes with what Mr. Corbo, Attorney Corbo said, is that your discussions that you have may reach another point, all right? And that there are some times that you can turn around and say, okay, fine, yep, yeah, that's something that a decision can be made. We need to get this to the screening committee as quick as possible. Okay, that's why we're having this meeting. Okay, so if we made this change here, that this is something you didn't reasonably anticipate, or if you did, please say so.
I certainly did not anticipate.
Okay, so therefore, it covers us to turn around and add that language in, because time is of the essence to get this done, because there's a short time.
Well, Mr. LaFond, I will defer to your vast experience here. Can we discuss and vote on this?
I would say, I believe if the issue or question that arises is reasonably associated with the issue at hand, it is something you could act on, but it is, again, the chairman's call as to whether or not what is raised is related enough to what's on the floor.
Well, it's certainly related to
So it's all
the
on you.
discussion of the screening committee. So you feel it would be?
I think in this case, it's so closely related to what you're doing.
Okay, that's fine. So we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion on this item?
One quick question.
Mr. Hoffman?
The difference between the bylaw, Chapter 3, and the special act, is there a lot of verbiage?
Actually, there isn't. The special act essentially just ratifies the bylaw that was passed by town meeting. So you can't go back to town meeting and just change something, you have to go back to town meeting, and then it has to go to the state legislature if you're trying to change anything that's in the current town administrative bylaw. So it's a two-step process. But again, all that did was ratify the town's bylaw.
So I guess my question is, Town Administrative Bylaw, Chapter 3, says this, this, and this. The special act says this, this, and this. Is there a difference?
No, I think the special act just basically says, yes, town meeting, we let you do what you wanted to do in the bylaw. So the act itself the act itself doesn't deviate in any way from the bylaw. It ratifies the existing bylaw.
Okay.
So it's a procedural thing, it's not a substantive thing, it's a procedural thing at the
Okay.
state level.
Well, if that's the case, then maybe we don't need to put it in here.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was asking, if it added extra information to help them
Yeah.
in their job.
It's a good point. Yep,
All right.
okay,
Everyone okay with leaving that?
yep.
All right. So the final item, it was brought up to me from the screening committee that they're concerned with the wording that the town administrator screening committee must present 4 finalists. They were concerned that, what if they only think there's 3? So they wondered if we might consider changing the wording to the town administrator screening committee must present up to 4 finalists to the select board.
I'll make that motion.
We have a motion and a second. Ms.
I was going to make a different motion, so never mind.
Oh.
Can I discuss this one?
Sure.
I would have recommended having it 3 to 5 candidates. Because if we only have 1 or 2 finalists, we may want to reopen that applicant pool, kind of like what happened with the finance director. And again, going back to things across the Commonwealth, 3 to 5 is basically the standard.
Well, it would always be up to us. We could always choose to reopen something.
Yeah, but just saying up to 4, like the thought of only getting 1 or 2 would, I like 3 to 5. Because 1 or 2 to me is just not enough options.
Mr. Belvin?
Wait, oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Sarah.
My only point is that it can't say there have to be 4.
Yeah.
There has to be 4. No, maybe there aren't 4, no matter how many times they reopen it. So up to 4 means,
That's right, and
two.
even, you never know what's going to happen.
Right.
We could only get 2,
Yeah.
and then, that doesn't mean we don't do something on our own, but it binds them, and I think the goal is to let them do their job without being bound.
yeah.
Having
It
to
just
come back
needs a
to
little more
us.
flexibility.
Mr. Belvin?
So this was one of my things that I, past couple of days I started doing, is I started looking around to see what positions are available out there right now for town administrators. I don't know if anyone else has done that, but I decided to do a little research myself. And there are a number, greater than 7, positions right now that are out there for town administrator positions. So you think about how many positions are out there and how many people who are going for these positions. So I don't know how many we're actually going to get. So there is competition out there, just to let people know. So I have no problem with this. I do like the 3 to 5, to be honest. I think I said that before. So, I mean, yeah. I don't know if they're going to come back with 5, to be honest. I just don't know.
It's
Yeah.
standard.
Yeah.
Well, again, my point is, regardless of what that number is, it's important to have the phrase "up to,"
Correct.
because that way, if they can't come up with
Yeah.
whatever the number is, it's okay. That's what we're telling them.
So can we make a motion to change, a friendly motion from 4 to 5? Just increase it to 5. That way.
So
we-
up to 5?
Up to 5. Up to 5.
Sure. Mhm.
That would be,
All right. Ms. Hewens, could you read back the amended motion?
The Town Administrator Screening Committee must present up to 5. How about may present up to 5? Wait a minute. May present up to 5 unranked finalists to the Select Board by September 1st, 2021.
Have a motion, is there a second on that?
second.
Second. Okay, any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. All
Mr.
right.
Chairman,
Mr. Belvin?
on number 3, it says, "The advertisement for town administrator must be placed by July 16th." I wasn't sure if, going back to the meeting that they had, if they actually did put an advertisement out already to MMA or to whatever other places. I'm not sure if they did that as of yet.
No, I don't think so. I think they're waiting for Elaine to get back, because she has access to the online postings for MMA.
Okay, all right,
She'll be
so
back, she'll be back midweek.
are they scheduled to meet, I turned my phone off. Are they scheduled to meet again at a certain time? Do we know yet?
They have not
I
said.
don't know, but I know their goal was to place the ad as quickly as possible.
Right, so can we extend that time frame for them? Because it limits them, today's what, the 12th? All right, and they haven't posted a meeting, so can we change this date from July 16th to July 30th, give them some time? I know we are on a tough schedule here, but you know what, we got to give them flexibility. I mean,
I think they know what the date is. Make a motion. and
I'll
we'll
make a
discuss it.
motion that we change the advertisement date to be placed to July 30th,
Is there,
up
No later than.
no later than July
Yeah.
30th.
is there a second?
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
I would like to just give them an extra week, maybe to the 23rd. Again, we have to, this is important, and I think that'll give them advance. To be honest with you, from what my feeling is, they're waiting to see how this meeting goes, and then I almost guarantee you that there'll be a meeting announced in the next couple of days, because once they see how we've changed the charge. So again, they could meet this week, although I think Mr. Walsh is on vacation, but next week. So I think if we gave them just an extra week, that would be fine.
Are you willing to change?
Yeah, I have no
the motion to the
problem changing that
23rd?
to the 23rd. That's fine. That's reasonable.
All right. And is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Seeing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? It is unanimous. All right. The next item on our agenda is a discussion and possible vote to allow the town administrator to carry over 5 vacation days from FY '21 to FY 2022. Mr. LaFawn.
And as I may have mentioned in an email, that is not necessary because of the terms and conditions in my interim agreement does allow for up to 10. So my apologies for bothering you with this.
All right. All right, so at that point, I would entertain a motion to go into executive session in accordance with Mass General Laws, Chapter 30A, subsection 21-2, to discuss strategy with respect to negotiations with non-union personnel, finance director, and not to return to open session.
And not to return open?
Not to return to open session. Correct, Mr. LaFawn? We no longer...
That's correct. I think the next item was more of a precautionary but unnecessary at this time.
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second. Okay, any discussion? Yes, Mr. Belvin.
Yes. I kind of going to protest this, and I did bring this up, that the finance director, I think a name should be placed in that. I'm kind of frustrated that I don't know how many of you guys actually know who the finalist candidate is. I didn't find out until a couple of days ago. No one told me who the finalist was. I turn around and I wanted to see a name here, and there is no name. No. The rationale for not having a name, I'll let Mr. LaFawn, because he talked to town council about this. So if you could please say why we don't have a name associated with this?
Mr. LaFawn.
Believe the advice from Mr. Corbo, and I don't have anything in writing from him, was that in effect, until there's a contract in place, there is some, it would be helpful for confidentiality. And there's a right to that until there's actually a contract in place.
All right.
Now, I would say, to that point, Bob, if there was a board doing a hiring, it's a little bit different, but technically, it's a hire by, appointment by the town administrator. The select board's role is to enter into or approve an agreement, an employment agreement. So it's kind of a hybrid system here. So in effect, it's not it's not like the board did interviews and now you have a finalist and that's public information at this time. So I think that's, again, without, I'm trying to paraphrase Mr. Corbo's comments to me, so.
Because, like, I mean, I asked for you to provide us with the the act that created the finance director in the town, so this, other board members can look at that and see how this system worked. And that's one of the issues that we'll have to discuss at a future time. But I just want to put my protest out there that a name should be placed in that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Belvin. We have a motion and a second. Mr. Hoffman?
Jim Hoffman says aye.
Sarah Hewen says aye.
Mark Townsend says aye.
Robert Belvin says no.
Jen Bogart says aye.
All right, we are into executive session.